one of the stories that we have is Rishi Sunak has given a speech at Downing Street, which many have described as pure cope, because the Conservative Party, for those who don't know, is not doing very well right now. So Rishi Sunak hits out at extremists, damaging our democracy outside Number 10. Foreign Minister Rishi Sunak speaks to nation following a rise in protesters and concerns about MP safety. From what I've heard, this is a pretty self-destructive, pretty desperate speech from Rishi, and it goes into a lot of the things that we've sort of set up before talking about it. So let's skip ahead to when he actually emerges.
Emerges? Sorry.
When he slithers out the tube.
It slithers, yes, he slithers out.
Yeah. To be fair, I don't think Rishi is evil. I just think he's a waste. And maybe he is evil. Maybe he is, but I haven't seen enough evidence to think he is. But doing inactivity in his position is, at the moment, pretty evil. And actually, from what Liz Truss, I think it was Liz Truss, has said, the rest of the cabinet. Well, no, it wasn't. It was Suella Braverman, who was actually good. The rest of the cabinet, when she tried to persuade them to deal with immigration, they just said, well, I don't really want to. And Rishi apparently said the same thing, and she had to persuade. Now, maybe Suella is saying this because she expects to take Rishi's job. But still, it's believable that could be the case. So it's hard to know if his inaction is due to genuine belief or if it's due to him being evil. Mr. Frenzy, it's hard to know who is a WEF plant. Because sometimes you will see correlations or you will see claims, but not dedication. So it depends. Even like wearing a pin is not necessarily dedication. It's hard to tell, but he's definitely the neo-lib wet Tory style. And so that aligns with the WEF, that we can agree on.
In recent weeks and months, we have seen a shocking increase in extremist disruption and criminality. What started as protests on our street has descended into intimidation, threats, and planned acts of violence. Jewish children fearful to wear their school uniform, lest it reveal their identity. Muslim...
That's the problem, is it? The Israel conflict, that's the problem. And it always starts with that. They always was kicking off with that. So the thing with Liz Truss, by the way, at the CPAC, one of the first things she talked about was Israel.
Always has to be. Always has to be. Now, I'm not going into that, but maybe you just have to speak your allegiance a little bit first before you start your speech. And let's not talk about the fact that of the rampant, violent knife crime and rape crime that's been happening in the UK for years in terms of problems in UK culture, if you want to put it that way, and criminality. No, but let's talk about this Israeli conflict. Sure, it's so. Oh God, that we're all well aware of the just got covered up by the police for a decade. Sickening.
Zifos is asking, why are their uniforms identifying them as Jewish? Are they required to wear a star? I expect that, and this is a problem in itself, and I think this is what you're getting at. Why are there Jewish schools? But I expect that there are, and that there are schools that even if they don't have like white and blue and the 6-pointer star emblazoned on their uniform, people know that they're Jewish schools, or at least they know that they're mostly Jewish schools, something like that. So that in itself is probably not a good idea. Although Garrow says Jewish school uniforms have a yid lid as part of it. They shouldn't. It's foreign culture.
Yeah, I mean,
unless it's a private company that's running the school, they shouldn't.
If it's a public school, absolutely not. But if it's a private school, I don't really have a problem with it.
Yeah.
I mean, what's it going to be? It's some private synagogue school with 6 students on each grade level or something.
That's not so bad.
I went to a Catholic school. That was private.
Gareth says it's religious. Also, I think all but one Jewish school in UK is private. Well. Okay, fair enough. There shouldn't be one, but okay.
Abused in the street for the actions of a terrorist group they have no connection with.
That's also a matter of like, okay, well, we're lamenting that the kids have to hide it. Maybe they do, but the school can fix that. They can. I'm not saying it's the right solution, but they can. The school is like, no, our identity is more important than the safety of these children. Wait, hold on, that doesn't. I'm not sure that quite fits. But yeah.
Now our democracy itself is a target. Council meetings and local events.
Oh, is that phrase? I hate it so much. I wish I had my soundboard. On our stream, anytime someone says "our democracy," which is a very telling phrase, it's like, or our democracy, our democracy. It has become now like a dog whistle to me. Not dog whistle in the true sense of the term dog whistle, in that it activates me, and I go nuts, and I have to like play a soundboard of this is a grave threat to our democracy. All the news anchors saying it at the same time. Excuse me.
Yep. It's much like when some small like insurgent group takes over some games company and says, no, this is your beloved childhood game, and it turns out to be like crap propaganda. No, but we have to defend this thing. It's a common propagandistic tactic to pretend that you're on the side of the thing that people already like. But they're not. And I don't know about, as I say, not sure about Rishi, but I suspect that he too is in practice an enemy of democracy. And yet he's talking about our democracy.
Now, of course, what I would say is that this is democracy. And it's theirs. That's why they say ours. It's our democracy.
In that case, it's not democracy.
Not to you.
If it belongs to someone else other than the people, then it has stopped being democratic. So
True.
We can certainly agree, Aidan, that the current state of democracy is not good. But I think the state that it can be in, the state it has been in, the state it should be in, the state that the ascendant right wants it to be in, is much better than this. Perhaps good enough that you would be willing to accept it.
Yeah, I still think it should be a king, but that's all right.
MPs do not feel safe in their homes. Long-standing parliamentary conventions have been upended because of safety concerns. And it is beyond alarming that last night, the Rochdale by-election returned a candidate who dismisses the horror of what happened on October the 7th, who glorifies Hezbollah, and is endorsed by Nick Griffin, the racist former leader of the BNP.
Those are your concerns, really? Not the fact that the majority of, not the majority, but the plurality, I think. I think it's like 30% actually in there. So Rochdale's low by comparison to some places. Are Muslim voters, are foreign cultural, and they voted for someone who, by the way, is also supporting Muslims, the part you care about. So no, the foreign conflicts and Nick and Griffin aren't the problem here. It's the foreign culture that has injected itself into our system and is proposing socialists, mad socialists, to be the leaders of areas with the help of Muslims, because it's destructive, frankly, and because that's what they want.
Yes.
Also, in that area, the Reform UK candidate reported getting repeated harassment, institutional prevention, death threats, all kinds of attacks on their ability to participate. And you're concerned about the implications for Israel? Fuck off.
This is nonsense. Exactly. It's nonsensical. And yes, why does the Muslim coalition, the entire Muslim population, vote for the leftist politics? They know it's destructive. They know not only is it going to give them money, but they know that it is accelerationist in terms of destroying Britain. So of course they're in favor of it. So they can take over because they're a warlord culture. Just saying. Holy
warrior cult culture, yes. The US, of course, has this issue as well, to briefly compare. But the US has recently got a man called Vivek Ramaswamy, who has opposed the Israel line by just being sort of like neutral on it, which is roughly where the rest of us are. Some of us are anti, some of us are slightly pro, but most of us are just neutral. We don't really care. We don't think it should be a part of our politics. And Vivek is that as well. Trump is pro-Israel. Most of the other MAGA Republicans, maybe their biggest flaw is that they're too pro-Israel. But it's one of very few flaws, I must say. But you've even got, Vivek is popular, maybe VP, and is neutral on it. So it may be that we get, at some point, someone popular on the right who is also neutral in it. But that is, as I say, one of the biggest issues with the populist right is that they are too obsessed with Israel. This Truss too. The first thing in her CPAC speech, as I said, was about Israel.
I mean, it's some kind of boomerism thing where, I've talked to my mother about this. My mom is a true just boomer conservative. And I've tried to talk to her about it, and she just says, well, very briefly, Israel's our greatest ally. If we lose Israel, then then what power does the U.S. have in the Middle East? I'm like, why should we have power in the Middle East? And then she comes to that point and then goes, and then it crashes. I mean, this isn't I love my mom, but like it can't just comes to that point, and then that next part of the question of the equation has not been answered. And that's where I think you get the boomer cons at. They go like, Israel's our greatest ally. We have to protect Israel because it's our only ally in the Middle East. Why do we need allies in the Middle East? Crash, error.
If it's your only ally in the Middle East, but it's being given artificial power to the point that it's buying your own politicians, it's time to stop.
True,
I
true.
need to you all this evening because this situation has gone on long enough.
Rishi does not exude confidence or charisma, does he? He
No, he comes off like a nerd. He's El Riz, you know?
he exudes the energy of a slightly damp blanket.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a weasel, says OTG. Yeah, I'm not a fan.
And demands a response not just from government, but from all of us. Britain.
Notice how he's barely moving as well. That is a body language sign of low confidence. The fact that he's got some madman in the background yelling, it's probably not helping his confidence. But still, like, at least Boris had the frizz. At least he was, at least he moved around. At least he was clearly confident, at least for part of his prime ministership.
Right.
Even Tony Blair, as Pugs just linked, was better than this.
As a patriotic, liberal,
pretty much anything would be.
So he's just said, as a patriotic, liberal, democratic society. Things I agree with. The problem is that what you're supporting, Rishi, is not those things. You see, you and your people see democracy as the oligarchy pretending to be democracy wearing its skin suit. You see liberal in much the same sense as the US does, where it's just progressivism. You see, what was the other thing you said? Patriotic as putting a British flag in the window and that's it.
No, patriotic is putting an Israeli flag underneath your Union Jack, right?
Or above.
That's true patriotism. Yeah.
No, patriotism or nationalism, not ultra-nationalism, which would be the worship of the state, but nationalism is putting your nation, and not just the borders or the on paper form of the nation, but what really comprises the nation, i.e. the people who love it, the people who are the culture of the nation, putting them first above all other considerations, just like America first in the US. America first doesn't mean Britain last, it just means Britain second after the US, which is fine, that's how it should be. And Britain first doesn't mean America last, it just means America second after Britain. That's how it should be for both nations.
Yeah, sure. Of course. Your nation first. That's the idea that it should be anything else is absurdist.
And again, not just the nation as a region or as a collection of population, as a bureaucratic entity, as the people who love it, as the British. Regardless who you have redefined as British from the Middle East, who honestly believe in 1,300-year-old religious doctrine, which is completely incompatible with everything in the West, unless you deliberately screw over the locals just to make it more powerful. But the actual British.
With a proud past and a bright future. We're a reasonable country and a decent people.
And that's been turned against us. That strength, which strength in most cases has been turned against us by the inaction or perhaps the malice of you and loads of other people like you who've detected our greatest strength at home and turned it into a weakness by changing what our home looks like and manipulating how it's used and how it's applied.
Yes.
Our story is one of progress, of great achievements and enduring values. Immigrants who have come here have integrated and contributed.
Progress is immigration, is it?
What about the natives? What about the collection of people who have been here for at least 1,000 years genetically, but up to 35,000 years, depending on how far back you go? What about those people? Never mind the immigrants, of which the successful immigrants who integrated are about like 5 to 10% of the population at most.
Yeah.
Well, meanwhile, the remaining 90%, not including the unsuccessful immigrants, who I don't know what proportion they are, but far too much. The remaining percentage are the ones who actually comprise the heart of the nation. They are the ones who caused those immigrants to integrate, who directed
more specifically,
what the culture is.
Going back even further, who created liberalism? Who? Whomstiviv? What culture created liberalism?
Yeah.
Oh, is it the Brits? As in the natives of the island, not, I mean, the French and there's some precursors there, but in terms of what we understand as modern liberalism, that is an English ideal, okay? This is not foreigners who have moved here after the fact. Absolutely absurdist. And also, therefore, what was adopted by America coming directly from the British common law system, that all derives from Britain. and not from this weird fake now anti-history shit they do. We're like, well, England was always full of blacks, and Marie Antoinette and everybody else throughout history. Every single historical figure was actually black. So was Queen Elizabeth or the first. Yeah, they were all actually black. I hate William Shakespeare was black. Okay, cute. Enjoy a little fan fiction, but in reality, no.
Mm-hmm.
The Norman population. The Norman Kelto population of these islands are the people who came up with all of this shit that you claim to care about and yet are destroying. Cute, though.
Primarily Norman, Roman, Celtic, and Anglo-Saxon.
Yep.
Some of the greatest conquerors in history. The Celts were the first to explore. The Romans were the greatest conquerors in history to a large extent. So the greatest empire builders in history, shall we say. The Normans were some of the
Mongols conquered more.
Yes. The Normans were some of the most powerful people at the time. They were given Normandy by the French for free just to fuck off. And the Anglo-Saxons were also very powerful of their time. So all the best conquerors have made their way here. And that forms the, yes, white, but more so it's about the culture, the British culture. And yes, people can immigrate there, but that's not the main brunt of it, Rishi. It's like with men. It's like they're just a value. They're just a unit which produces value. Then they're blank entities that fill the space. That's not what the British people are. The British people in the UK are the UK. Regardless the borders, regardless what's written down, regardless the crown jewels, regardless the parliament, the British people and the British culture they have is Britain. And the foreign interlopers are not part of it. The immigrants who have integrated, fine. The immigrants who have not integrated need to be removed.
Sure. Yes, and many of them refuse to. Not only have they not integrated, they actively say, no, I will not. I'm just going to come over here and rebuild my culture in yours, in your land. Because they have no respect. And why should they? When you denigrate yourself, you bow down and say, oh, do whatever you like. Oh, I'm so glad you're here because now we can have curry. Sure.
Bro, we have the recipe.
Really worth it. Yeah, we got the recipe, bro.
Yeah. We've had the recipe for hundreds of years.
in fact, much of what you think of as modern Indian food that's enjoyed anywhere all over on planet Earth is British. It's not fucking Indian.
It's the anglicized version of the shit they invented.
I know.
That's why chicken tikka masala, most popular British dish. Yeah. Not their version of it, though. Our version of it.
Yes. I love that diagram or that graph that's like most popular dishes in the UK, and it's like tikka masala, and they'll say, oh look, look at how great it is to have foreign people. No, that's not tikka masala as they make it in Bombay. Okay, it's a little different.
we weren't culturally influenced by chicken tikka masala the way that the Japanese adopted a lot of American culture after they got nuked. No, we captured chicken tikka masala for ourselves and made it our own thing, made it better. That's ours now, essentially. It's barely Indian at all at this point. It's just an Indian name.
It's not. Yeah, no, it's not. It's just like Tex-Mex in the United States, right? Like, oh, I'm going to go to Taco Bell. This is Mexican food. Are you out of your mind? That's American. I mean, like, we did less conquering of Mexico, to be fair. There was a little bit of a war there, but still, we did less conquering of Mexico than the Brits did of India. Obviously, but that's tikka masala. I mean, I don't know. I've never been to India, nor would I want to, because I enjoy toilets and hygiene. So,
Chat, put it in her notes. Aiden enjoys toilets.
I enjoy having access to a toilet. You know what I mean? And hygiene. But I think that if you go to India and order tikka masala, if you even can, it is not going to be anything like what you get at the Indian takeaway.
And if it is
anywhere,
it's because it's better this way.
Gone back around. It's because it's because it's gone back around. It's gone full circle or something,
so,
right?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And speaking of Indians,
they have helped write the latest chapter in our island story. They have done this without being required to give up their identity.
That's wrong, though, Rishi.
They have not.
Their identity. Well, either way, their identity should be British, and then secondarily, whatever their foreign identity was before.
Yes,
that's how you run a society. Anything else is sabotage and surrender.
The Americans, the U.S. used to also get this, but we're failing at it now too. Is that it should look, you can be. I mean, that's the American melting pot idea, going back before modernity. What if you look at the demographics of the United States, the white population, so who largely made it up until recently? It's Anglos and Celts and Germans, Scots Irish, right? So that's who it is. It's all these, and then some Scandies and stuff like that. But the whole idea was, well, yes, you can be all of those things, but you are American.
Yeah. That's what the melting part is.
Yes,
if it was just a pot, sure, just throw whatever you want in there. It's what's been been done today. But they melt into the mixture that is Americanism before everything else.
I mean, going back even further, the UK is even a older example of that in terms of Welsh and Scots Irish and Anglos and Normans, and you had at some point these are distinct cultures to some degree, but the
mixing of those cultures was meritocratic. It was as a result of decades and centuries of conflict where the locals fought and the locals were, in most cases, defeated by the interloping invaders, but those invaders proved worthy, and the genetics didn't replace, they just mingled, they just combined. That's why I say, like...
Well, there was a lot of raping going on too, but...
But that's what I mean, that's part of it, but that's a combining. That's what happens when an invader wins. They replace through whatever means. The men are no longer there to defend the women, as unpleasant as it is. But that's 1,000 years. The last time that happened in the UK, legitimately, is 1,000 years ago, roughly, with Hastings. Yes. So that's part of our shared history now. Americans who have any British ancestry, that's part of your history as well. So those Anglo-Saxons and those Normans or whatever, both of them are our ancestors. It's that union of two successful groups which formed this the British lineage and also culture. But what's happening now is, in a sort of total sense, it is still meritocratic because our weakness is that we're too nice, but it's not an honest conflict. It's not that their genetics are better. It's that our genetics are too good, so we became complacent, and then this was allowed to happen. And the most aggressive and destructive possible attack was perpetrated. But it doesn't have to stay that way.
The Brits and the Americans, as an extension of that, because we are essentially, we're originally high trust societies, and we're not really prepared for this kind of stuff. For these people to come in who are taking advantage of the high trust societies that we had built over the courses of again, coming out of England and then going to the U.S., high trust societies where, despite all the, at some point coming to form a better union and getting along and forming that kind of society. These people have no desire to integrate. They just want to conquer, and they're conquering through snake tactics because it's easier that way. And they'll conquer through violent force the second that they get a foothold. But they get a real foothold, it will become violent. It already has been. Obviously, the knife attacks, the truck attacks, clearly.
You can be a practicing Hindu and a proud Briton as I am, or a devout Muslim and a patriotic citizen as so many are, or a committed Jewish person.
Probably not the majority of Muslims. Even then, like, what is a citizen to you, Rishi? Is it someone who goes to the local corner shop with an Indian guy working there, but either way, who goes to the shop and buys their groceries and then goes back into their home, watches British TV and sees British news occasionally, but then gets beaten by their husband with a stick no wider than his thumb, and when they go out they have to wear burqa covering their face, where they breed only with their own people and are subject to Sharia laws in the area they live in. They live in utter shithole neighborhoods that greatly resemble the neighborhoods they came from in the Middle East, the Third World.
By their own creation, by the way.
At what point, Rishi, do you put the line where everything below that line is what we care about and everything above it is irrelevant? Because I would say it's all important, Rishi. I would say it's all important. And
I agree.
The Muslims that have moved to the UK, some of them integrate, but not that many these days. Nowhere near enough. And the ones that don't, they form enclaves, they form just little Islamabads inside the UK.
Yep.
And it's not just the UK, obviously France and Germany is maybe even worse, depending on, I don't know exactly
France
whether
might be
it's
worse, yeah.
But either way, of the UK, that is not acceptable, Rishi. You can't just point to, but look, some of them are good. Yes, but the problem is the bad ones.
Yes,
and you're supposed to be like, this is why no one's voting for you, Rishi, because they don't believe you care about the actual problem.
But you won't talk about it. Talk about those towns in England that are 99% Muslim, where everything works off of Islamic law. I mean, you've got the calls to prayer. The entire town is Muslim. There's like one Anglo left who can't leave, probably because they're an old pensioner who can't afford to. That's it. Is it not being conquered?
Those towns
Talk
have
about
been.
that.
Yeah. And I don't know what the solution to that is. I don't know what the ultimately, I don't know what the solution to that is. You could suggest all kinds of
and ship them out.
You could suggest forceful means, but that's there's downsides. If you can do it without needing to do that, it's better. But if that's the only way, perhaps that's what's necessary.
Oh, cut off all their welfare. No more public funding. No more NHS.
Once again,
bye.
Same with 1984. I think the thing that would break that psychological lock of 1984 is just the abject lack of merit. Because you need some resources, some value flowing through the system. And in 1984, it would just reduce to zero, and then that would be it. It would be anarchy. Same thing. Exactly, you're correct. That's where you start. And maybe that's enough on its own to just make them earn their own keep, and they won't be able to in most cases.
I've seen this. I remember reading some articles about this where I can't remember where it was. Some country, it's been a while, and it's been months, like just said they were going to just reduce some of the benefits. Was it the United States? And people said like, well, if they're going to reduce my benefits, I'm just going to go back. No, it must have been the UK. Well, I'm going to go back to India. This is much better in India. Okay, bye. Go back to the Punjab. I don't give a shit. Well, second, you can't get any benefits. You're showing your whole ass about why you're here. It's not about job prospects, but trying to enrich, make sure that my family can live happily. No, you were living fine in India. You just weren't getting as much money as you expected from the UK government. Because you come over, and that's the thing. That's when they come to a high trust society, take from the system that was invented for a high trust society.
Yeah.
And then when they can't get it, they go like, well, I'm out then. Let's go back.
Because I've heard some people talking about the idea of sponges, the idea that benefits just goes to people that sit there and suck it up all day. And this was years ago I was hearing about this. And I think from what they were saying, that the sponger class is small. It doesn't exist. It's not huge. But I think they were talking about British people back then. It may be that you're exactly right, that that's the one primary and only thing that they're relying on, that if you take that away, it doesn't matter anymore. I think that what you said about high trust, the benefits like that, whatever you think of them, chat, and whatever you think, whether they've gone too far or not far enough or whatever else, they exist because we can trust people, not to just sponge, and that generally they don't. That generally British people tend not to, with some exceptions, of course. Now, as it's always going to.
I'm going to say, you know for a fact there is a spongy class, lower class, chav, particularly I would say women who just go get pregnant the second that they're 16, and then just I'm just gonna live on the state. I'm gonna live in council housing the rest of my life and pop out a whole bunch of kids. But they make big news. People like that. They always make the news. They make the tabloid news, right? Because everyone else in England is looking at them and laughing and being like, wow, look at this piece of shit. That's the shaming element. That's the shaming element of society that should exist. And those people used to get shamed. You're not allowed to shame the welfare sponges who are from Pakistan. Because now you're being culturally insensitive. You're allowed to make fun of and shame the chav welfare queen. You're allowed to shame her. And her brood of kids that she's just popping out to live in her council house, right? But you can't make fun of for that same shit.
Yeah, because they're not part of culture and they are being defended by the establishment. But again, if you get rid of the establishment, if you get rid of the artificial defense, you get rid of the propaganda and the bureaucratic prevention, then these things will gradually fix themselves. Obviously, there's still work to be done there, but that's what's holding it back right now. The forces are trying to do the work. They're trying to fix these things, but they're being prevented by a system which is not eternal, is not unkillable, is not unbeatable.
I think that's true, yeah.
Of your local community, and all underpinned by the tolerance of our established Christian church.
Too tolerant these days. That, like, tolerance is not a value to be held above all others. Tolerance is for peacetime. Tolerance is for a high trust society. Tolerance is for a people who like each other and who have a common vision. Tolerance of some variation means that you can explore new ideas more, which is necessary. But too much tolerance is suicide.
It also means tolerating. It doesn't mean accepting, embracing.
Yeah.
It means going, okay, I'm fine with you doing your culture, whatever, and I am tolerating it. Does that mean I have to embrace it? What the left has been pushing for years and years now is no. Tolerance is not enough. You must engage in it, whatever the thing is.
I think
actively.
I think pluralism of things like religion is okay. It's maybe not ideal, but it's okay. You can have that as long as they're British first.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, actually.
The morality of a society, religion helps keep the morality of a society consistent. But it doesn't have to be religion that does it, and it doesn't have to be only religion that does it. The culture of the society, inherently, which is informed by the genetics, also do that. Now, religion, I think, helps, but it doesn't have to be permeated 100% to maintain that. And there are advantages to having variation, genuinely diversity of thought from people of different places in the world, mixing in the valuable traits of genetics from across the rest of the world, just a small portion, maybe 5-10% of them, into the traits of the good cultures. Because any successful traits that may exist elsewhere will have those, just like chicken tikka masala. And if all that takes is that some of the best and brightest of their society come and help us instead, despite the fact they're brown or black or Asian, that's fine. That's even beneficial. Too much purity is inflexible and brittle. Too little purity, well, you can see what the hell's happening now. You want just a little bit of impurity floating around in the system, that the system, to keep the system moving, keep the system changing, keep it a bit more variable. But of course, this has gone so much too far that the whole idea of diversity has been blackened in the minds of conservatives, and rightly so, largely because our enemy often misuses it. But what it really should mean is that it's just not all clonal. Asia's clonal. They're all the same. But in Europe, it's never really been that way. It's always been a little bit of other cultures, of other types of people, other lineages inside our own cultures. Sure. And that has been greatly beneficial.
Look at the royal family. Look at the royal family, for example. And how much intermixing there has always been for 1,000 years with other European monarchs. There's always
to that as well, but
yes, there's downsides to that as well. Well, no, that's the whole point was to not inbreed by trying to marry in with other royal families, right? Yeah. So there's always been some cross-cultural stuff to some degree, just on that level. But that's at the highest level. It happens at every level, obviously.
We are a country where we love our neighbours, and we are building Britain together.
We love our neighbours when they are worthy of being loved. British neighbours usually are. Middle Eastern neighbours usually aren't. I don't mean racial, I mean cultural. There's not many more ways that I can state this, Rishi, but it's just, this is the problem with your thinking. I am arguing in favour of Britain. You are arguing in favour of Airstrip 1, of just the landmass, no matter who's in it. Yeah. The bureaucratic entity, the landmass. That's what you're arguing for, Rishi. I am arguing for Britain itself.
Based.
But I fear that our great achievement in building the world's most successful multi-ethnic, multi-faith democracy is being deliberately undermined. There are forces here.
Why does it have to be?
Just because you mentioned democracy, or is it something else?
No, it was the multi-ethnic, multi-faith. Why does it have to be those things? Why does that make democracy better? Why does that improve it? What about that is inherently valuable? I have yet to have anyone tell me what is inherently valuable about being multi-ethnic or multi-religious.
Yeah. Look, there is no getting away from the following fact, no matter how much you choose to and screen and whine anyone out there. the most successful societies in human history by an order of magnitude or more have been white and Christian.
Yep.
Now, whatever else they've been, I don't think that whiteness or white skin or Christianity have been the only important factors, but they have been correlates, strong correlates. Yeah. And so it's not sensible to just say, well, yeah, but every other society is just as good. No, they're not. Ours is the best by far.
Go to Africa. You go to Africa and tell me about those mud huts and how incredibly impressive they are. And they all go kill each other every 5 seconds.
Yeah. Garrow, there have certainly been successful societies in the past that were not white and Christian. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the most successful societies that have ever existed.
In Asia? Yes.
Exactly. As he said, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. What I'm saying is the most successful societies that have ever existed by at least an order of magnitude are the Western, white, Christian, liberal Democrat societies.
England controlled the world for a reason. Okay? I think there's a reason for that. How can one island control most of the planet? I think that I don't think it's just because they're white. Maybe that's part of it, but I think that it's about the society. Okay,
yeah.
I think it's about the society that it is built upon. Okay, that's my opinion on it. I mean, what do you think about that? What do you actually think about that in terms of like you've got cultures that like Russia? When Russia's been very successful as well. That essentially spans an entire continent, though.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that was land that no one else really wanted, to be honest.
No one wants, right? Right.
But Russia's also been a very powerful empire in the past, utterly vanquished by communism in the early 20th century. They would be a lot better if not for that.
But the culture that ultimately colonized the entire planet was the English and the Dutch.
You're just saying that because you like Spoon.
No, I hate to say that. It makes I have to spit the word Dutch when I say it, but it's true. It's the English and the Dutch.
The French and even the Germans had colonies too.
The French, they did as well.
But the French colonies were almost exclusively shitholes. And the German colonies weren't that great either. The Dutch and the Portuguese both did pretty well, but the British had the best empire.
Portuguese did as well, yeah. Obviously, the British had the best empire. And again, when you think about that on a large scale and try to really, really like put it into context, that one tiny island conquered the entire planet, essentially. Is insane. Why? I don't think it. I think it's because of the ethics, the morals, the belief system behind it.
Yep.
I think that's why. Because it can't be just out of manpower. It can't just be out of throwing people at something.
Exactly. It's a qualitative difference.
Yes.
And Rishi is treating it as purely. It's just a place. Just a place.
Just so happened. Just so happened.
Yeah, if you were to extrapolate what he's saying now to that, he might say, well, because we were the most evil, we had the biggest guns, we wanted to do the most colonizing. We literally almost everything the British Empire did made the places it affected better.
Better, yep.
And they're still better today than they would have been without it.
Yep, exactly.
Not so much with the French. If you think about like a bunch of third world countries, chat, think of the worst ones and just check if their names look oddly French. Invader says, mark my words, next time we will be much more brutal and the world will thank us for it. I think it's more in keeping with the British spirit to be only as brutal as we need to be, but yes, the world will thank us for it. And it had, like, it's not just Britain, obviously, with our sort of offshoot nation of the US and a bunch of the Anglosphere nations, that's what I view as what's worth defending. The Anglosphere nations, and to a lesser extent, other nations that should be better. France, Germany, even Russia, some other European nations as well. South Africa, to some extent as well. The Anglosphere but is the real prize.
I agree. It's the Anglosphere that needs to be able to figure this shit out because a little bit comes out of British common of the British common law and that knowledge and that sort of understanding of legal systems and morality, and that should be the basis because it's clearly the best one.
I mean, if we resist this globalist bullshit, where it's basically an attempt by powers across the world to prevent the most powerful societies becoming completely dominant, if we can resist this, we might bounce back so hard that we become the long-term only dominant power on the planet. If we stop,
be fun.
Yeah, exactly. And then ascend to the stars, completing our destiny. We've already won the Battle of Earth, I think. Essentially,
Yeah,
all we're
Elon Musk
doing
could be
now
happy about that.
is resting so hard on our laurels that our societies, which are dramatically more powerful than any other that's ever existed, are actually in danger.
People have been historians, philosophers, etc., scholars have for, I don't know, what the last 200 years been saying that America is just going to be the Rome 2.0. I think it's avoidable still. I still think it's avoidable to truly be Rome 2.0. But we have to shift course very quickly to avoid it. But I think we can. But the course has to be shifted.
I am very hopeful about America 2024. I'm approaching hopefulness about UK 2024 as well. Let's keep hearing what Rishi has to say. This man being ineffective may produce the change that gives us genuine hope for the UK. The thing is, Aidan,
I don't know, Boris is also totally ineffective. And
he was almost entirely ineffective, yeah. The thing is, Aidan, that even if my optimism does not work out, and even if we cannot recoalesce the right around good ideas before the election, and even if Labour wins with their massive majority they have, and even if we suffer under 5 years of the horror of what shit they'll do, that will be instructive. And I think if we survive those 5 years as a nation, after that, the resurgence against that will be so much stronger than it would be now, just like Trump is winning against Biden much better than he was in 2020, but supercharged, because it's going to be that bad. If the Conservatives lose so badly against Labour, they might just lose all their support, and all that support will go to someone who can do better. Reform UK, and it's proved like it's going to be very evident now to everyone that that's why the Conservatives aren't doing well, because the actual right wing aren't supporting them anymore. So even if we can't beat Labour in time, 5 years hence, I think we will beat them very well with
it
a
has
party
to be the
that
same
actually
thing.
has hope.
It has to be the same thing in the US, I believe. We needed a MAGA party, right? Which some people have proposed, because the Republican Party is completely cucked. It's owned, it's bought and paid for. The GOP is full of rhinos who suck. There is a MAGA movement in the United States. There's people who support Donald Trump, and doesn't have to, even though it's based around Trump. It's by being based around Trump. It is also based on the ideals that Trump represents. Look, as someone who fought for years to try to get the Libertarian Party on the ballot, because we had to have 5% of the vote, could never meet it ever, because people can't understand what libertarianism is. And I mean, libertarianism is a bit of a mess, to be fair. I understand why people don't get it. I understand why people don't want to vote for it, because you have people like Goofy Gary Johnson representing it. It's that same thing where if you have to start to break off into a third party, that's what will inherently happen. This has happened in German politics. This has happened in Dutch politics, where the Conservative Party or a Democratic or a left-leaning party, a major one, will split. It does mess things up, because there are some adherents who just say, I always vote for this party. I've always voted for that party. It's my social identity, and I don't care even if it's things that I supposedly believe in. It's this name of the party is associated with my sense of self. I'll keep voting for them no matter what. That's the mess, and that's why I'm not in favor of democracy. That's why things
change slowly, perhaps slower than they need to. And I think, as I say, that slow change is beneficial in a sense, but when you can see the problems in front of your eyes and you know full well what the correct answer is, but the normies don't go with you, it can be extremely frustrating, and I'm right there with you. But I think that's an argument for patience, and that we need to continue to prove ourselves, because they will change eventually. That social identity theory, the consistency of voting just for the same party over and over again, we have not seen an example yet where it needed to break so much as it does now. And there was that poll I mentioned with Conservatives at 20 points, Reform UK at 13 points. A lot closer than you'd expect. I think the entire Brexit wing of the Conservative Party has just started to move over to an alternative. And Reform UK is the alternative they're choosing because it's the one that's available. I think it could happen this time. I think this time a year from now, the Conservative Party might be hoping that they exist a year from then. And they might not. They might not exist in any reasonable way. It might be that Reform UK just takes all of the seats they had, except maybe one or two, and then also takes a lot of seats that were due to go to Labour instead. It might be that all these areas which are going to Labour, which are full of people that don't want that to happen, who don't want to vote Conservative, they'll just vote Reform UK, and it'll be a battle between Labour and Reform UK. Maybe they're the only places left where Labour, the Conservatives, are actually winning anything is exactly those places where it's just social identity theory, where it's just very old people who have voted for it all their lives, and that's too powerful. And that's not so bad, because at that point, the Conservative Party is going to be extremely heavily influenced by the politics of Reform UK, and they'll just be a sideshow attraction to what Reform UK is doing. So all of this very much could happen. I'm actually quite hopeful about it. And it's much harder to rig elections here than it is in the US. Possible, but much harder.
Yep.
In the US,
True.
they have that backstop of, well, it doesn't matter how popular he is, we'll just rig it. Here, they don't really have that. Again, you can rig elections with paper ballots, but it's more difficult, much more difficult than with computer voting.
They're at home trying to tear us apart. Since October the 7th, there have been those trying to take advantage of the very human angst that we all feel about the terrible suffering that war brings to the innocent, to women and children.
I do not care about Israel and Palestine.
Yeah, I just don't give a shit.
But
We're talking about England.
You're standing up there talking about halfway across the world, people are suffering. My dude, your people are suffering now. I don't care if they're not suffering as much. It's your people. People that are voting right now, by the way, not for you anymore.
No, because again, have you been to the shops? Have you seen like how much shit costs? That's what they're concerned about.
Getero and Ziphos and others as well, strongly implying that Rishi does not care about the British people, that his people are halfway across the world, Indians or perhaps the Middle Easterners as well.
Yes.
Maybe so. Maybe that's how he sees it. I think it's more so that there's other Tories that are just as wet who aren't Indian. I don't know if it's that. With him, maybe more so, but that's not the problem, ultimately. There's other Tories that are just as wet.
To advance a divisive, hateful ideological agenda. On too many occasions recently, our streets have been hijacked by small groups who are...
There are entire cities that have been hijacked by large groups.
You
want to name those?
Do you?
The whole like divisive, your inaction, and the hate, your inaction is more divisive and hateful than our response. And what I will say as well, more so than any political movement I've seen in my lifetime or even really heard of, Donald Trump's movement, the MAGA movement, and it's similar over here, is uniting very strongly. Because Trump is getting votes from groups who have been pandered to and coddled and genetically altered and propagandized for 50 plus years. They're starting to vote for him now because it's not enough to just have that pandering. We need value because every life form in the universe wants value. And for that, you need merit. So ultimately, it does come back to that. Ultimately, you have to find a leader who can actually produce, who can actually get results. Rishi cannot. The Democrats in the US cannot. But Trump can. And there may be some UK leaders who can as well. Ultimately, it will always come back to that. That's a good point, Garrett. Rishi is unelected, but the processes of internal party politics, which produce a new leader, can produce good leaders. And so saying that he's unelected is not enough on its own to say that he should be removed. But it is a point that you can make other points with.
Hostile to our values and have no respect for our democratic traditions. Membership of our society is contingent on some simple things, that you abide by the rule of law.
Okay, Muslims to a large extent don't. So why have they not been kicked out?
They apply their own law. Yeah, they literally, they come into areas, they say, no, we do not give a shit about British law. We're going to apply Sharia law, and we're going to have our own courts. We're going to have our own punishment systems, and we're not going to give a shit about what the UK government has to say about it. And the UK government won't do anything because they're too pussy to say anything about it. We wouldn't want to be culturally insensitive.
So even in what Rishi just said, he's made my point. there are many people in this country, millions in this country, who do not belong here by your definition. And you're in charge. Why aren't you helping to do something about that?
And that change can only come through the
not in his interest.
Process. Threats of violence and intimidation are alien to our way of doing things. They must be resisted at all times.
Every single time I have seen any evidence that those have actually happened, it's the left doing it during the culture war. The right just doesn't do that. They've been, as I said, the right has been remarkably
complacent,
peaceful and principled. The new ascendant right have been remarkably peaceful, principled, good, honest people, high trust people, the kind that you want to build a high trust society around. They don't do threats of violence.
No, and yet they'll go in to try and infiltrate like right wing events and stuff, and try to just like to sniff out a racist or something like that. Just to try and they'll send in journalists to try and sniff out the racist. We got to go in here and try to find somebody saying anything bad in any way that possible. Meanwhile, the left openly espouses violence. We would want to report on that, and would be because that's our side in the journalistic class.
They do. The left frequently openly espouses violence, whereas if the right just implies they need to take action, be pursued to the ends of the earth for that.
Yeah.
Spooner, the ascendant right is exactly what I would ask for right now. If you get to the point that there is no peaceful solution, then it will be too calm and there will need to be an alternative. But I expect it'll be many of the same people from that ascendant right, from the popular right, who will at that point decide, yes, it is time to go beyond peaceful measures. But I hope we don't have to go. I hope we don't have to go to that. And right now, the populist right is exactly what I'd want them to be.
Nearly everyone in Britain supports these basic values.
Nearly.
But there are small and vocal hostile groups who do not. Islamist extremists and the far right feed off and embolden each other.
Not really, no. The far right, as you say, does not really exist in the UK. What you have is populist conservatives who are not far right.
The far right? You mean like Carl Benjamin? Whoa, how scary. Like that's and that's the kind of person they will prop up as a far right extremist. Insanity. Someone like Carl Benjamin is a far right extremist. Or Tommy Robinson. Absolute insanity.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Meanwhile,
these are your far right extremists.
He did at least mention Islamic extremists. Well done. That has entered the
briefly.
Forced lexicon of even the neo-libs at this point. But they have taken over cities. They have implemented their own laws. They perform millions on specifically British white girls and boys as well.
They're equally desperate to pretend that their violence is somehow justified, when actually these groups...
Can you point me to the quote-unquote far-right violence there, Rishi? Can you point me to that?
Well, I've been waiting for information about that for, let me check my watch, like 8 years.
There are several people in chat.
Far-right violence?
There are several people in chat who wishes there was any, who wishes there was just some so they could go and join in, but there isn't. The best you can come up with is, whoa, but Tommy Robinson and his supporters, who were themselves attacked during a peaceful protest, but the press just didn't cover that part.
And then they unpersoned Tommy Robinson to the point where you can't even say his name. Are you out of your mind?
Tommy Robinson
is
a British hero who wants to be peaceful, but is constantly attacked by leftists and the press because they like an opportunity to attack the right. Pretend that Robinson was somehow instrumental in creating the fight, when really he wasn't. He's an investigative journalist and a protester, an activist who is peaceful, but will defend himself if he's being attacked. He would have been killed by now if he wasn't.
Are two sides of the same extremist coin. Neither group, except that change in our country can only come through the peaceful democratic process. Both loathe the pluralist modern country we are. Both want to set Britain against Britain, to weaponize the evils of anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim hatred for their own ends.
What about anti-far-right hatred?
Oh my God.
What about... You just said that Islamist extremists and the far-right are doing all these evil things, and the problem that they're trying to produce is being mean to Jews, being mean to Muslims, and that's it. No other group.
It's insane though that he says, "Oh, the far right and the Muslims are the problem, but there's also all this anti-Muslim hatred." Excuse me? Which one is it? Like you got to pick one there, okay? Are the Muslims extremists or is there anti-Muslim hatred? Pick one. I don't think that those two things can exist simultaneously.
This,
I mean, they can to a certain degree, but
yeah, this speech should be the death knell of his party. I want the Conservative Party to dissolve at this point and be completely replaced by Reform
them to fall apart. As do I. Just dissolve.
The only alternative is if all the worthwhile people take over the Conservative Party, kick this guy out and put someone better in, which it could happen.
Kemi Badenoch to become my wife.
Of course you do. Badenoch's pretty good. I like Braverman as well.
I do like her.
Yes, if Braverman is leading the party, I'll have more confidence, and probably the rest of the public will as well. That could happen in the next year. But I think it'll take more than that to save the Conservatives right now, because Reform UK is already making strides, and plenty of people from Reform UK want to be in that Conservative Party if it's healed and Badenoch is in charge. Not Badenoch. Well, Badenoch can be in cabinet for sure.
She should be up there. She is spicy.
She is. Braverman, I think, is closer. So, and I like her as well. But yes, they're both good. Those two and several others as well.
The left has a hard time also because remember all they care about is identity politics. So they have a really hard time going against someone like Kemi because they go, oh no, she's an immigrant. She's black. She's a woman. Uh-oh. What are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to attack her? Uh-oh. All of our vectors of attack are screwed. But she seems to be. Now, I could be wrong, and I hope I'm not. She seems to be legitimate about her conservative political beliefs. Yeah. And I hope she's legitimate about them. I've been spurned on that one too many times to trust, but still.
I'm not sure that we have been spurned as many times as we thought, by the way, because the main issue with the UK politics is that our democratic processes can't necessarily access where the power is coming from, which is the Quangos, the various institutions, the non-governmental institutions, which the civil service, which supports the parliament. So democracy can't directly reach that. We can reach the halls of the commons, but if they don't have the real power, then it's not really democratic anymore. But we still have some access to it, and I believe a prime minister can still do more than this one has. So what you need at that point, what was the point I was going to make? Yes, there may be some in the past. Priti Patel is an example of this, I suspect, where she claimed to be all rah-rah right-wing and anti-immigration and stuff, and we all believed her, and then she released that report about Muslims, which did not mention Muslims once, and we all lost faith in her. But did she have no choice? Again, they're not necessarily in charge. They're not necessarily the ones that control how that stuff is released. I wish she had made a statement, a public statement saying this release was the result of these institutions which are contrary to the will of the people. All that. That's what she should have done. But that's timidity, not betrayal, if that's the case, and that's not good. But the Barbarian, remember that was her name? She should have done more. But still, I don't think she's a traitor to our movement. I think she just should have done more. And the same thing with a lot of these other ones. Perhaps Boris, but I'm not willing to give a lot of benefit of the doubt there.
No. No, Bojo can go get stuffed, to be honest.
But we don't need him anymore. But I think he was better than most, but regardless. Braverman, I think, is probably honest in her beliefs. Badenoch, I believe, is too. Probably quite a lot of the pro-Brexit backbenchers are as well. Yeah. It may just be that they don't have the power to implement their ideas. Like having a different party in might help with that. Having someone in that knows that's the problem might help with that. And it was Liz Truss in CPAC that sort of like expressed this very clearly. That's the problem, and that she was sabotaged out by that kind of person, as I had suspected. It very well might be that Priti Patel did everything she could and was sabotaged out by the same processes from right under Boris's nose. Maybe he knew, probably he did, and that they will try to do that with anyone that gets in. Yeah. But just like with Trump, eventually it'll be too much for them to stop. Too powerful. Because the will of the people is the ultimate power.
I suppose so. All I've seen in the last couple of years is just a real life manifestation and play out of yes, minister. You know what I mean? It's the problem with bureaucracy. It becomes a play. It's a shit show. It's theater. It is literally political theater. So much of this is.
True, but the truth is starting to break through.
Maybe. I hope so.
The faith of Islam, peacefully practiced by millions of our fellow citizens, is emphatically not the same thing.
Very peacefully practiced.
What about the ones that practice it violently, Rishi? What about right-wing ideology peacefully practiced by millions of our own citizens. Again, it's telling how you choose to appear balanced, Rishi.
Yep.
What you're doing here essentially is telling the British public, you're wrong, we have to accept the foreign colonizers. And the British public, frankly, disagree with you at this point. Enough of them, and more by the day. This is why you're not getting any votes, Rishi. At this moment in your party's history, where it's probably at its least popular in 50 years, you're coming out and telling the British public, what do you mean? I love the Muslims. That's essentially what you're saying here, Rishi.
Oh, they're so good. Oh, they're so sweet. It's great. Don't you love having a bit of shawarma, right? It's great. You can go to the takeaway and get your shawarma. It's fine.
Yeah.
Come on.
And it's,
that makes it worth your daughter's getting, obviously.
And it's obviously Rishi has mentioned Islamic extremism in this, but everything else that he has said about them has been in their defense. And he only mentioned Islamic extremism in the context of, but the far right's just as bad. No, they're not, Rishi. It's not even vaguely close.
Point me to one instance of that's what you were saying before, but exactly. Where's the far right extremism in the United Kingdom in terms of attacks? Where is it? Where's the violence?
This is very similar to the way that Dev deals with quote unquote balance. I'll lay this out because I mentioned this on the Spoon video. There is, in my opinion, an absolute or nearly objective scale of politics. Something which you can map almost anything onto. Hot and cold, fast and slow, left and right, and libertarian and authoritarian. You can be mapped roughly onto this grand super dichotomy of belief, where it contains every possible political extreme, every degree of political thought, in obviously aggregated down to a single dimension, where the further you go, the more logarithmic the scale gets, because there's only so authoritarian or libertarian that you can get before it's as much as it can be, within reason. But it starts to drop off. So there is this absolute scale. And the Overton window slides across that scale gradually. It moves usually back and forth. And it's okay, it should be moving back and forth. But then sometimes it goes way too far in one direction. And on the absolute scale, what should be in the middle ends up being far right extremist in the Overton window. Now, none of this is particularly controversial. But what I think Dev is doing as a shit centrist, and others who these days call themselves centrist, often some of the more popular, clearly leftist ones, is they are trying to align themselves, and quantitatively, not qualitatively, quantitatively, to the middle of the Overton window, not to the absolute political scale. Now, there's another step as well, because if you align to the absolute political scale and you put yourself in the center of that, you could still be wrong, because sometimes what the world needs is not exactly the center of the absolute political scale. Exactly. Sometimes it should slightly to the right or slightly to the left of that. So you
depending
have
on the context, yes.
What Rishi is doing here is saying, well, the far right and the far left, or the far right and the Islamic extremists, he didn't actually mention the far left, funny enough, they are both bad. Of course. And so they must just be the two bad sides. And so I've just got to condemn both of them. A quantitative, quantitative analysis where it's just the left and the right, or someone on this side, someone on this side, and they're both bad. And we just condemn both of them. Quantitative analysis, which is similar to what SFO does. But try
pretends to do.
Try, if you would be so kind, to drop the Overton window from your analysis and concern yourself with what is right, not just what is in the middle, and then also concern yourself with what is right for the day and modulate your belief according to that. And that form of centrism is what I align myself with, and I consider myself to be a good centrist, if you like. Frankly, I think it's what most of us do, in fact, that we wouldn't call ourselves centrist for doing it necessarily.
Because you're trying to find a middle ground that is fair to everyone, not based on what is currently in the political gestalt, what is in vogue. Whereas what Dev does is that he moves along with the Overton window. He will deny this, but he does absolutely. And there's many such cases. Dev, I think, is trying to move where he thinks, and not just him, but a lot of centrists are moving where they think that they're able to win on very, very small, and by win, I mean, it's not to stop the movement of the Overton window further left, because they're actually not opposed to that. They just kind of want to postpone it, because we've talked about over and over again, is that people like Dev and a lot of people who fall into this sort of center, left, center position, depending on where the Overton window ends, is that they just want to go back to 1990. They just want to rewind the clock and be like, it's 1990. I want to play my video games again and not have all this stuff. You can't do that. It's not possible.
That I think is
you cannot do this.
Yeah, those two influences are related, but in SFO specifically, it's the faux balance and the political nostalgia. They're related, but they're a little different.
Back to Rishi Sunak.
The rest of society. Islamist extremists and far-right groups are spreading a poison. That poison is extremism. It aims to drain us of our confidence in ourselves as a people and in our shared future. They want us to doubt ourselves, to doubt each other, to doubt our country's history and achievements. They want us to accept a moral equivalence between Britain and some of the most despicable regimes in the world.
Don't you want to, though? To get rid of the history of Britain, essentially.
Well, what he's saying here is a little better, I will grant, but it's still, he's still saying the far right, which is just not true, Rishi. The far right, as you call them, who are in fact the popular conservative right, the non-neoliberal conservatives, the now modern conservatives, in fact, the fresh new wave of conservatives, they are actually in favor of protecting those things, not just in word, but in deed.
Yes, exactly. So you just talked a bunch of shit about these other issues, but now you're coming at this and saying, well, we're trying to protect British traditions. Are you, though?
This history you wish to defend, Rishi, what would you say about the British Empire? Would you say that it was the best institution at the time by far, that it was beneficial to almost everywhere it encountered? Or would you say that it was a regrettable colonial period in our history, which we have moved past? I think you would tend towards the latter, and that is disgusting.
Yep, I'd like to know the answer to that, and I think you're correct, Uzalu. I think it's how you'd answer that question. Is that, how a terrible part in our history that we have to overcome.
We need to overcome it by doing it again, but more.
But in reverse.
Well, what I'm saying is we need to do it again, but more.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree with that. That's what I would agree with. But what Rishi's saying, I think, is that, like, no, just let have all the Indians come over here because we colonized them, and now it's their time to, as he is, time to colonize us. That's not how that works.
The Anglosphere, with the support of Europe, need to band together as not a single nation, but as a single unit, bound by common values and common goals, to wrest the world away from the unworthy who have taken far too much power, make them useful to our destiny of finding ourselves among the stars. That could be the journey of the next 100 years.
West, more generally, is solely responsible for the world's ills, and that we, along with our allies, are the problem. In short, they want to destroy our confidence and hope. We must not allow that to happen. When these groups claim that Britain is and has been on the wrong side of history, we should reject it and reject it again. No country is perfect, but I am enormously proud of the good that our country has done. Our place in history is defined by the sacrifices our people have made in the service of their own freedom and that of others.
Watch him only mention things that benefited other people, like abolishing slavery, which is an achievement, but watch him only mention those. Let's find out.
And who did that?
The British and Americans, and
who did it first?
I'm not sure, actually.
But who? The British. The British were the first to abolish slavery.
And when these groups tell our children that they cannot and will not succeed because of who they are, when they tell children that the system is rigged against them or that Britain is a racist country, this is not only a lie, but a cynical attempt to crush young dreams and turn impressionistic minds against their own society.
Impressionistic?
How did that happen?
But you mean like the art style?
I mean, you
mean impressionable, you idiot.
Impressionable, yes. He's reading from a script.
He is, yeah. What he's saying here is is how the neoliberal would attempt to capture the Brexit crowd without really believing it. It's like 10% of the way to what we believe, but it's just words. I don't believe him for a sec. If this is mostly about Rochdale, which, yes, given the timing, it probably is. What happened in Rochdale, we have the story, is Labour actually failed to field a candidate. There was some moral concern, but they didn't field one. And then Galloway, who was like a big old left-wing mouth like speaker, from the Workers' Party of Britain, just swooped in and took all the Muslim votes. A horrible situation there. But on the right, Rishi and the wet Tories did not do very well, and Reform UK did better than expected. But the thing is, the threats, the violence, the attacks, the attempts against democracy, all this stuff, the only thing I've heard about there was against Reform UK.
Yeah, I wonder why.
And by the way, probably exclusively coming from socialists and Muslims.
I stand here as our country's first non-white Prime Minister, leading the most diverse government in our country's history.
Yeah, the diversity has increased just as the chaos and collapse has increased. Isn't that strange? A conservative should not be talking about diversity or the race of himself or anyone else in the party. You're the first pointless brown Prime Minister in history, and one of the worst. One of the least effective at a time when effectiveness is so essential. One of the and you weren't chosen by the people either. You just ascended to the position after the people's second choice in the party was sabotaged out. Who, by the way, was a white woman. Second we've had. First one was quite successful for a lot of things. Yeah, and diverse just means non-white, as we have well learned. So yes, a conservative should not be talking about that. Everything you just said about being pro-British has gone out the window with that. Oh, yeah, of course, Gingy, you're correct. She was the third woman PM. But I'd rather not count May, to be honest. She's quite forgettable, isn't she, May? And all Tory, of course, yeah.
To tell people of all races, all faiths, and all backgrounds, it is not the colour of your skin, the God you believe in,
so clean,
determine your success, but just your own hard work and endeavour.
Yeah, but that's not being applied, though, is it? If it was, then it would just be pretty much, not exclusively, but mostly white Christians and white atheists as well. It would almost all be them being successful. But that's not what's happening. And a lot of these places, as was discussed earlier, these Muslim enclaves, about which I have not heard you speak a word, they are not actually earning much themselves. I mean, they're used to third world conditions. They get first world benefits. There's no end to how many of them can multiply there and how much they can disengage from the rest of the world.
We must be prepared to stand up for our shared values in all circumstances, no matter how difficult. And I respect that the police have a tough job in policing the protests we have seen, and that they are operationally independent. But we must draw a line. Yes, you can march and protest with passion. You can demand the protection of civilian life. But no, you cannot call for violent jihad.
What was the cause? By the way, thank you for being slightly on the right side of that one.
Yeah,
what was the what was the cause of all this chaos, Rishi? Like, do you actually know? Because this speech isn't going to do anything.
It feels a little bit schizophrenic. He can't really talk about Muslim violence now, can he? Because that would be politically incorrect. No, it should not be from a conservative perspective. He should be able to talk about Muslim jihad, about the truck attacks, about the knife attacks, but he can't, because that would not be that wouldn't be polite, now would it?
If his goal here is to turn down the political temperature, then just words doesn't do that, Rishi. You've got to figure out what's the cause of it. And just coming out here and saying, please stop being so aggressive to each other. Well, why are they being? Is it because you hadn't told them not to? No, it's not, is it, Rishi? It's because of other reasons. And again, it's not the right doing this. It's the Muslims supporting Hamas are a big problem right now in terms of violence. But the Muslims in general in the UK, not all of them, but a large portion of them, are also the problem for violence and anti-British activity. Again, it doesn't. What you're saying here does not do anything. You could have taken this opportunity to virtue signal to the people you need to vote for you. Instead, you've mentioned them a couple of times, given them a couple of tiny glints of hope, tiny pinpricks of hope in this speech, and at every single turn, you've shit back directly on them. the anti-British thing, by the way, anti-British activity kind of makes it sound authoritarian, but I think you guys know that I'm not advocating for that, and nor would I ever want that to be the case. Classical liberalism and democracy and capitalism are the three ideas I propose, and I don't want our country to become authoritarian. The only thing that might be necessary is that briefly to just recover what we need to be, what we should be, so that democracy is not so marred by the interlopers. It might happen. I'm not saying I think it's necessary or right, but it might happen. And perhaps if it gets worse, I would agree that it's necessary when it does happen. But I would strongly advocate for that to only be temporary, as I think it always is with dictatorships. They don't tend to last very long, especially not under or over a people who are principled. But for the sake of the long-term survival of the country, and again, it's not about race; it's about British culture, Britishness, and that'll be good enough. That'll capture the people that shouldn't be here. And leave alone the ones who should.
That's how it should be, yes.
There is no context in which it can be acceptable to beam anti-Semitic tropes onto Big Ben in the middle of a vote on Israel-Gaza.
By the way, that was not consented by the government, but as far as I know, it's not. But it did happen. It was done. Anyone could do it.
He keeps bringing it up, though. He keeps bringing it back to Israel-Gaza.
Yeah, he does. He does.
This is telling. By the way. Oh, yeah, he does. He's very, Tony Blair-esque here, isn't he? Curious. Interesting.
Like, he's weaker-willed than Tony Blair, but even the voice is similar.
Yeah.
Not exactly the same, because it's weaker. It's definitely weaker than Tony Blair.
Tony Blair minus 10 charisma, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, he does keep bringing it back to that. Now, if the speech is meant to be primarily about that, then why the hell are you bringing up the far right? Again, they are a non-entity in the UK. And if what you mean is popular, right, then they are not violent. Figure it out, Sunak. Pick one. And then look at the actual problem. The people being violent in these protests, how many of them are actually white even, let alone right-wingers? Or even non-communists. Communists, but to a larger extent, Muslims are the ones being violent in these Gaza-Israel protests, as far as I know.
And there can be no cause that you can use to justify the support of a prescribed terrorist group like Hamas.
I don't care, but Israel is in many ways as bad, if not worse. So I don't care. People can support whatever foreign bullshit they want, just don't put it in my politics. As long as my politicians don't care beyond how it directly affects our nation, I don't mind. And I don't believe, by the way, that anyone else who is British truly does care, except to the extent that they have been propagandized that way.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Only the most propagandized would fall for this shit.
I'm not even there talking about no true Scotsman. Oh, you think the left aren't Brit? No, even the left wouldn't care unless they'd been propagandized to.
Yes, exactly.
The Muslims do because of their Muslim identity, but even that is somewhat propaganda as well.
But that's because they want to take over. If you look into Muslim law, Muslim ideology, their explicit goal is to go into countries and take them over. It is written by the Prophet, is to take over countries and conquer them. Yeah. They've been doing it, by the way, for the last 800 years. Okay, they've been really consistent about this. They're just doing it a little bit more slowly now in Britain. But that is the point, ultimately, is to take over Britain and make it a Muslim country. The entirety of this concept requires the West to exist in the way that it was 40 years ago. Meanwhile, they're trying to also destroy all of the systems that allowed the West to exist 40 years ago, and then asking it to still exist. Yes, it's counterproductive on every single comprehensible level. Please come still save us and give us money and give us all your stuff, but also we're trying to destroy you and make sure that we have to tear you down so that we can achieve our Marxist equality. What do you want? Which one? You have to pick a side on this. Do you want to destroy the West? Or do you want the West to prop you up? You have to pick one.
Ultimately, there is this subversive demoralization against the West that I think the main source of our opponents, the origin point of of the opposing force of the West, of that sabotage, of that demoralization, is China. It's not the only one, but I think that's the root for most of it.
the actions of this government, or indeed any government. That is a fundamental democratic right. But no, you cannot use that as an excuse to call for the eradication of a state or any kind of hatred or anti-Semitism. This week,
He has used the word anti-Semitism 2 or maybe 3 times during the speech. He has not said anything to defend the people of Britain specifically. The actual British people specifically. He's not mentioned
he's defended
how
Muslims, defended Jews. He has not defended Brits.
He's barely even defended any conservative ideas. He spent more time talking about Israel and Gaza and that war and that conflict than he has talking about Britain during this speech.
Yes, you're a traitor. You will not talk about Brits. You will only talk about outside forces, about Muslims, and about Israel. This is not Britain. You are supposed to represent Britain. What are you doing?
Met with senior police officers and made clear it is the public's expectation that they will not merely manage these protests, but police them. And I say this to the police: we will back you when you take action.
So that part's fine. But the thing is that the police also take action against the peaceful actions of your so-called far right. Not as much here as what happened in the past in the US, like in 2016 in the US. That was remarkable.
And they don't take action against Muslims all the time. It keeps happening. In the UK, we keep seeing reports where they get dropped because it's their culture. Some young 14-year-old girl gets, it's like, oh, we won't want to step in because the Muslim community is handled. Meanwhile, oh, don't pay your TV license. We're going to storm down your door. Insane. This is a very broad dichotomy there.
What he said about the police doing their jobs and dealing with violence, obviously I'm with you on that, but is this just a trap? Are you just saying, we'll back you no matter what, and then when it comes to it, you won't? Just to get rid of the people in the police who do care, who are more capable of dealing with these problems, who are more willing to stand up for peace and for their society, and are willing to fight back against aggressive Muslims. And then the press will go at them and you will fold immediately in defending them. It seems like it might be a malicious trap, but that's what will happen, whether you meant it that way or not. We will back you, but will you? Have you done so before? I don't believe you. I think you would defer to the press.
I think you defer to, because they're a bunch of bitches. So whatever they think is not going to get them in the least trouble, you'll defer to the British press, which is, by the way, probably the most snakish and just, if people think the American press is bad, look at the tabloid nature of the British press. It's way worse. And I have to say that it's so much worse. It's so bad.
There are some interesting differences, actually, between the UK press and the US press.
Differences.
The US press acts like the government Pravda. They act like the state press. The UK press, no matter who's in power, act oppositional to the current power structure. And I think that is better, but I think it's mostly a facade because they are all in favor of the great grift, the globalist, pseudo-socialist grift. So regardless, no matter what color the press is, it's in favor of that. The Daily Mail, the Daily Express, they're both in favor of a large portion, the Express less, but a large portion of the bullshit ideology.
The Mail for sure is in the long run. So get that.
The Daily Mail is just the boomer.
Get that twisted.
The boomer paper. The boomer conservative.
The boomer paper.
They have not.
And don't get that shit twisted, right? Yeah. Just don't get that shit twisted. That they're as in line with the establishment as anyone else.
But if we are asking more of the police, we in government must also back up that call with action. To that end, this month the government will implement a new, robust framework for how it deals with this issue, to ensure that we are dealing with the root causes of this problem, and that no extremist organizations or individuals are being lent legitimacy by their actions and interactions with central government.
Okay, those are some very nice words, and I'm being very generous there, but what does this policy actually do to protect the police? Because the problem is not that the policies on the books don't protect the police. The problem is that the government defers to the press when the press says that was racist when he's defended himself from this angry horde of Muslims. it's not about what's written down. It's about the will to act. What are you going to do? And the fact that he's not even telling us what's in the robust framework implies to me that the answer is nothing.
You cannot be part of our civic life if your agenda is to tear it down.
So it might be, Aiden, that along the line of Scrump's, like they're gonna put away the woke and turn it around and make it about not necessarily, but this is one option: is make it about Israel. Palestine, make it about that conflict,
that might be the way they turn the woke.
Because that topic cuts orthogonally down the normal cut of the culture war.
Sure.
Yeah. Maybe that's what they're trying to do to turn things around. Maybe, if they are trying to do that, again, it doesn't seem to be working very well. Like all this violence in the streets, but what people care about in this election is still immigration. It's still the same issues. But if that is what it is, then you would expect establishmentarian figures like Rishi Sunak to be talking about it almost exclusively, and that's what they're doing. So there's a real chance that is what they're trying to do. I just don't think it's going to work.
We'll redouble our support for the Prevent program to stop young minds being poisoned by extremism. We will demand that universities stop
by extremism, not necessarily just Muslim, though. So what you could do with that is you could just define your opponent's beliefs, maybe even the beliefs of the people who threaten to split your party's vote, Rishi. You could define those beliefs as extremist, and then you would call them something like far right. But luckily, you've never talked about that as being a problem, so I'm sure that's not what the Prevent program has been used for.
Extremist activity on campus. We will also act to prevent people entering this country whose aim is to undermine its values.
Will you? Why weren't you doing that before, Rishi? Because more legal immigration has happened from people who probably do have that intention, who are not culturally compatible here, than the boats. And the boats are still happening as well. They're still being let in, and it's costing millions to save them, and then millions to let them in, and then millions to house them, and then millions to process the applications. But there's nothing to process, really. You know what they are.
The Home Secretary has instructed that if those here on visas choose to spew hate or protest or seek to intimidate people, we will remove their right to be here. And our Britain must not be a country in which we descend into polarized camps, with some communities living parallel lives. It is not enough to live side by side. We must live together, united by shared values. Extremists hijack your marches. You have a chance in the coming weeks to show that you can protest
it sounds better.
Peacefully and with empathy for your fellow citizens. Let us prove these extremists wrong and show them that even when we disagree, we will never be disunited from our common values of decency and respect. I love this country. My family and I owe it so much. The time has now come for us all to stand together to combat the forces of division and beat this poison. We must face down the extremists who would tear us apart. There must be leadership, not pandering or appeasement. When they tell their lies, we will tell the truth. When they try and sap our confidence, we will redouble our efforts. And when they try and make us doubt each other, we will dig deeper for that extra ounce of compassion and empathy that they want us to believe doesn't exist, but that I know does.
Not quite Winston Churchill, very generic platitudinal, and I don't believe it aligns with what your actions will be, or have been. That's the main reason. But this is unfortunately not about compassion, because the British people already have some of the most compassion in the world, not just Anglosphere in general, and a lot of Western Europe already have the most compassion in the world out of any ever, by the way, almost. So that's not the problem. The problem is how it's being abused by people who pay your bills one way or the other. As I said earlier, the problem is not that we need to be more compassionate. If anything, the problem is that we need to control our compassion a bit more, be wiser with it, to apply it more so to those who deserve it, rather than being completely openly tolerant. Be tolerant of those things which are tolerable.
If we do that, we can build on our great achievement in creating today's Britain, a country of kind, decent, tolerant people. We can make this a country in which we all feel a renewed sense of pride. This is our home. So let us go forward together, confident in our values and confident in our future.
And there he slithers his way back in.
This is not a man who inspires confidence. That was very platitudinal.
No.
Didn't have much to say at the end because it's all very generic, or it's stuff we've already discussed earlier. But yeah, that was pretty tragic. And the
yeah, it was tragic because we were describing it. That was tragic. Yeah,
yeah,
it's abysmal.
Have a look at the polls quickly. Yeah, Conservatives still quite a long way behind Labour there, and the Reform Party are now in third place. Actually, very recently, that's just happened. So yeah, that's what you've essentially done there. So there's different polls here that show different things, but the trajectory, look at the trajectory, the one here that is changing the fastest is Reform UK upwards. So I'm quite hopeful about that. When Sunak became Prime Minister, Reform was at, 2%? And now they're at 10, about a year later. That is quite some momentum, and most of that momentum has been in the last 6 months. So I do have some hope that Britain will change, and as well as that, I have more hope for the US. It's looking very good the way things are heading there, with a lot of small problems, of course.
I hope so. Yeah.
And I think at this point, though it's obviously a nasty potential future, I would be willing for Reform to completely split the Conservative vote to the point that the Conservative Party stops existing, essentially, or it significantly changes, even if that produces a Labour government. Because I think the Conservative Party at this point either has to completely change or be replaced. And hey, Reform is also blue. So there you go. No need to change much.